Hey guys, so today I am starting my coverage of Big Brother 25, where we are going to do our preseason power ranking. We got the cast about 6 hours ago, I got a chance to listen to the interviews, and it is time to rank these people based on how likely I think they are to win, based on my first impressions of them. And I should say up front that even more so than my Survivor preseason power rankings, this should very much be taken with a grain of salt, given that, well, we literally just met these people and we're going off very limited information, and it's obviously going to change literally the moment that the season starts, but that's just the way that it is. But there are 16 people to look at, and let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into the ranking. So starting off at number 16, the person I believe is the least likely to win Big Brother right now, based on the information that we have, is Blue. And I feel like this is mainly due to the lack of information, where Blue spoke the least out of anyone in the interview. And I feel like a lot of that's because they weren't even in the house when the interview was being conducted. So I feel like based off that limited information, I can't really have her too much higher. And then also, I do worry a lot that she could be an early boot. I feel like while there are definitely people she could align with, I feel like she'll definitely be an outlier. She could very well be an early target. And I feel like that's not particularly great coming into the season. But again, I feel like she has a lot of potential to prove me wrong, as we could literally meet her and she's a great player. We'll have to see. But I feel like based on what we know right now, I can't really have her any higher than number 16. Now moving on to number 15, and this person spoke quite a bit during the interview, and I feel like this person could have some longevity, but I feel like based on the information that they gave, I can't say that I'm too confident. But here we have Red. And I actually think Red could make a relatively deep run. I think he could really endear himself to a lot of people, and I could see him being like a Donnie from BB16. However, I feel like based on the information that he gave, I don't feel like he's going to be the best player, where he admits up front that he's not much of a super fan, that he took a long break from watching the show and only got back into it recently, that he's going to play by the seat of his pants, that you can't really come into the game with a strategy, and that he wants to prove to himself that he can play the game and not just be like an armchair strategist, basically. And I feel like that's probably not the best mindset to be having coming into the game, especially when there's a number of bigger fans out there. I feel like he definitely may not grasp the strategy as much as I would like. However, I still think he can make it pretty far, but based on the answers that he gave, I can't say that I have too much confidence in his ability to actually win the game, which is why he is here number 15. Now moving on to number 14, and I did consider putting this person a bit higher. However, I still feel like this person's not going to do super well at the end of the day, but we actually have one of the more notable names on the cast, and here we have CORY Wurtenberger, the younger brother of Zach Wurtenberger from Survivor 42, and I feel like CORY will play very similarly to Zach, where obviously we saw Zach not do super well on 42. Mind you, I feel like CORY might do better here, as I feel like someone in his archetype would do better on Big Brother, where physical strength early on isn't as important, that he could realistically fly under the radar. But I feel like he's going to play very similar to Zach, where he's not going to build the social bonds that he needs to not get on the block. I feel like he's going to struggle to win the comps that he needs to avoid being on the block, and I could very easily see people just letting go of him early on without really caring too much for him. And plus, he comes off as pretty confident in his interview. Now, some of that could just be like him putting on an act, but I still feel like that'll translate to his game, where I feel like he'll just overestimate his abilities. Now, he could still surprise me, he could still make a deeper run. However, I feel like the similarities of Zach can't be avoided, which is why he is here number 14. Now moving on to number 13, and we have another player that I think could make a deep run as well, and I think could surprise me, but I still feel like this person may not do the best based on their answers. But here we have Matt, who I believe is the first hearing impaired contestant on Big Brother, which is pretty cool. And I feel like the main advantage going for Matt is his physical ability, where he is pretty athletic. He competed in the Deaf Olympics, and I could easily see him being picked up due to his comp ability, where he could win in competitions for his alliance, and I think that's pretty good. And even in his response to the strategy question, he did float the idea of winning the first HOH, which I think is a decent mindset to have, although he also throws in some other strategies, so how much is he really going to go for that? We'll see. However, I do have a couple reservations with Matt. One is obviously the fact that he is hearing impaired, where even though he says that he's good at lip reading, I could still see people like not being as willing to talk with him simply due to the challenge of maybe them not hearing him correctly. So I think that could be a concern. But I think the bigger concerns is that he's just not as big of a fan as other people, where he admits that he's only watched a couple seasons. And plus, he does seem to talk a bit too much about the physical competitions, where while I feel like Big Brother is better suited for that mindset, I still feel like I don't know his full strategic knowledge of the game, which, considering that there are super fans on the cast, is a worry for me. So I feel like there are enough red flags to where I couldn't put him any higher in the list, but I still feel like his usefulness to his alliance could give him some longevity, which is why he's here number 13. Now moving on to number 12, and this is someone that I definitely like. However, I feel like they're a bit high variance. But at number 12, we do have FELICIA, who is the oldest person on the cast at age 63, and I believe she's the oldest woman to ever play Big Brother, which is pretty interesting there. And I do like FELICIA a lot, and I think this cast is a bit better suited for her given there are a couple other older people in the cast as well. But I still think she's a bit of an outlier, as I believe the next oldest person is BOWIE at 45. So I think that could be a worry for me. I also don't know how big of a fan she is, given that she talks a lot about being her true self, being able to build relationships. She says that she wants to prove that she can build these relationships and just let the game take her wherever she wants. And I do worry that she may not come to this game as prepared as certain other players. Mixing in the fact that she is a bit older could make her a relatively early target. But I still like her, and I feel like she could find some inroads. She could definitely find her people and make her deeper run because of that. But I feel like with me not knowing how big of a fan she is, I can't really have her any higher than number 12. Now moving on to number 11, and I feel like these next couple of players are pretty similar in that I could easily see them making it deeper in the game, and I feel like they are competent players, but I feel like they don't have too much upside. But at number 11, we do have MECOLE, and I like MECOLE. I think she's someone that I think will be a pretty baseline player. I could see her getting the majority alliance, and I feel like she is someone that'll probably make jury. However, I feel like some of her answers don't give me as much confidence. Like, while she does talk about being inspired by Xavier and Taylor, I also feel like she's probably not as big of a fan as other players, or at least we didn't get that from the interview. So I feel like that was a factor, and I could also see her just being picked off along the way. I feel like she definitely has some ability as a player, but just nothing that makes her stand out, which is why she is here at number 11. Now moving on to number 9, and we have a player sort of similar to MECOLE, but I feel like they have a bit more substance in her interview. But here we have KIRSTEN, and I think KIRSTEN has a bit more going on, where she does talk more about her strategy, where she talks about wanting to align with the strong players and how you need a strong alliance to steamroll. We're also a bit more familiar with her history with the show, where she talks about having watched it as a kid. So I feel like we have a bit more information on KIRSTEN compared to MECOLE. But sort of similar to her, I feel like there's nothing that really stands out about KIRSTEN to where I can't really see her like dominating the game, at least based on the information that we currently have, which is why I can't have her too much higher than this spot, though she could definitely surprise me. She is here at number 10. Now moving on to number 9, and we have another player sort of in the similar mold. However, I feel like this person has even more information on themselves, but here we have America. And I feel like America's a bit of a better version of KIRSTEN, where we know that she's a big super fan. She's been watching it for years, and she does seem to be a bit more active in how she wants to play the game, where she wants to downplay her threat level. She wants to play the game more strategically. And I feel like her strategy is a bit more independent than KIRSTEN, where KIRSTEN seems like she's just going to be a member of this big alliance that she'll end up in, but not really control that game per se. I feel like America will definitely do more to try to control the game, where she talks about going about it from different angles, like flirting with the guys. I feel like America is someone that could very well end up in a showmance, which I feel like will be beneficial for her game. But sort of similar to these other players, I feel like America may not ultimately win the comps that she needs to actually win the game at the very end. And plus, I could see her falling in a similar trap as Alyssa from last season, where she could just end up in a showmance and sort of ride with that showmance, not really branch out from it, or even be targeted because of it. So I think there's enough downsides with America to where I can't really have her too much higher, though I could definitely see her breaking out, which is why she's here at number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and I like this person as well, and I feel like they could have some success on the season, but also worry about their long-term prospects. But here we have IZZY. And I like IZZY. I feel like she reminds me a lot of Evie from Survivor 41, as both of them are both relatively recent fans, but have really gone all in the time they have been fans, where they admit that they have seen every season twice. And plus, I feel like they're the type of person that will play the game strategically. They talk about lying low early on, but then winning comps later on. And I think she could definitely find some success because of that. However, also similar to Evie, I could very well see her emerging as a big threat later on, where they could be like the leader of their alliance and be picked off because of that. So we'll definitely have to see how that plays out. We'll have to see whether they can truly win the comps that they need. But I feel like if they are able to do that, they can be a very capable player. However, with the prospect of her like making it to the jury phase only to be targeted shortly thereafter, I do feel like that's enough of a concern for me to where I do have them here at number 8. Now moving on to number 7, and we have probably the biggest name on the cast, and definitely the person that I'm the most excited to see, though how successful he'll be, we'll definitely have to see. But here we have Jared Fields, the son of Cirie Fields. And I'm excited to see Jared. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how he does on this season. And I think he'll definitely be pretty capable, where I feel like he'll be a pretty well-rounded player for the most part. However, the question is how successful he'll be in managing his threat level, where he does talk about minimizing his presence unless he's absolutely needed, and he says that he's not going to tell anyone that he's Cirie's son, which I think is the correct approach. However, will it actually be effective, as I feel like Jared's probably one of the better known relatives of former Survivor players, let alone like legendary Survivor players, and I feel like with the amount of super fans there are in this cast, I can definitely see him being recognized by certain people. I could see that being a hindrance for him. But then again, like it's not a guarantee that it'll be an early target, as we literally saw Nina come into Australian Survivor and have some success there. So it's not a guarantee that it'll be targeted. However, I also do question like how well he'll actually do at the game, where he does talk about how he doesn't want to showmance and he doesn't want to win too many comps, which again, I can see it as him lowering his threat level. But I feel like with the value that competitions have, I do feel like him holding back a bit more could be a bit of an issue. But even so, I still feel like he'll find some success on the season, and I could definitely see him making a deep run. But I feel like the top people are people I have a bit more confidence coming into it, which is why he is here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and we have another person that I think could be quite successful at the game, but have a few questionable things that make me question it. But here we have Cameron. And I like Cameron as well. He actually looks a little like Christian in a way, which is kind of funny. And I think Cameron definitely has a lot of things going for him. He is a big super fan. I feel like he's someone that is athletic enough to where he could win competitions in some cases. I think he's someone that, at least on paper, understands the game. And I think he's someone that has a lot of upside. But with that said, I do have some reservations, particularly with some of his interview answers. Like, I don't love the way that he talks about how some people are born to be sprinters, but you have no idea what you're doing up until you're up against the wall, which could lead to a more aggressive gameplay style. Mind you, I don't think he'll actually play that way, but the fact that he said that does make me question it a bit. Plus, he also admits that he doesn't want to win too many competitions early on, which I don't think is the best mindset ever, especially considering that you need competitions early on to really solidify your power structure. So I think that's not ideal either. So while Cameron's someone that I think has a lot of upside, I also feel like there's enough holding him back to where I have him here at number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and sort of similar to Felicia, I think this person could also be a bit high variance. I could see them being on the outs early on. However, I think this person also has plenty of upside. But here we have BOWIE, who is one of the older players on the cast and is originally from Australia, which is actually pretty interesting. But I actually like BOWIE a lot. I feel like they gave a lot of solid answers. They talk about how they were a fan of Big Brother when it was on in Australia, which I don't know how much that translates to her knowing BBUS, but it's something at least. Like, I like how she's able to talk about the game. I feel like she, like, gives a pretty general answer about getting into a big alliance, but also a smaller one as well. And I think she's someone that is at least aware of her game as well. However, there are still some downsides, like the fact that she is a bit on the older side. I could see her being on the outs early on. Also, the fact that she is Australian, which I don't think will be as big of a factor on this cast, but is still something worth highlighting. And Plus, I feel like her level strategy talk isn't as deep as I would like, even though I feel like she'll still bring a decent amount to the table. So I feel like Bowie will definitely be an interesting figure on the season, but not someone that I have at the tippy top of my power ranking, which is why she's here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and this is another player that I think could do pretty well, though I could also see them sort of flaming out. And here we have Hisam, who, even though he's one of the older players on the cast, he seems to be in pretty good shape, so I feel like that'll translate to him doing well in competitions. And I feel like he is one of the bigger fans on the show as well. He talks about being a pretty big fan. He also has a pretty detailed strategy about how he wants to have his own ride or die that's good at comps. He's able to create these two factions and able to ride the middle of that. Though I do question how successful he'll be in that, as I do feel like one of his downsides is I could see him coming off as a bit sketchy to some people, which could get him targeted. But I still feel like if he's able to avoid that, he is someone that could build bonds with a lot of people, where even though he is one of the older players in the cast, I could see him connecting with some of the younger players as well. So I feel like that's enough to have him this high on the list, though I feel like the top 3 are people I have more confidence in, which is why he is here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and I did debate whether this person is too high. However, I still feel like this person has some upside, and here we have Luke. And Luke's interesting as he reminds me a lot of Kyle from last season, which may be a good or a bad thing, but I remember last season I felt pretty high on Kyle early on, and to be fair, he was in a solid position for a lot of that season, and I could see Luke ending up in a similar spot where he's someone that could be pretty good socially, someone that's able to come off as this pretty affable guy, but still able to have some potential within him. Now, unfortunately, we don't know much about whether he's as much of a super fan as other players, which was a reason why he's not higher on the list. And plus, he also talks quite a bit about how he wants to be unpredictable and how that's his horoscope, which, again, could be a good or a bad thing depending on whether he's serious about that, but it was still something worth mentioning. I feel like Luke is someone that has a lot of potential to do well in the season. However, I feel like there are enough concerns and a lot of unanswered questions about his overall strategic ability that leaves him here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and this is someone that I think could do pretty well, even though some of their answers aren't as concrete or specific as other players, but I did decide to go with Riley here. And I went with Riley for a few reasons. One is that she is a big super fan. She talks quite a bit about how she's always been a fan and that she understands the game. And while her answer about her strategy is similar to that of Red's, where she talks about embracing her situational awareness and that how plans don't go according to plan and that she wants to adapt, I feel like her understanding of the game makes it so that she's better prepared coming into it compared to Red. And I feel like she's someone that'll be pretty well liked, someone that I feel like will be a bit more out in front and a bit more active socially. And I feel like she's someone that has a lot of upside without as much downside as other players we already talked about. So I feel like those were all pretty big factors and someone that just makes me feel kind of good about Riley. But I still feel like the number 1 person is someone that I feel a little bit better about, which is why I do have her here at number 2. And now at number 1, and my winner pick going into Big Brother 25 is Jag. And Jag is someone that I just all around feel pretty good about, where he is a big super fan, talks about how he's watched the show for years, that he would enjoy playing the game and is super competitive. He talks about how he wants to play a social game, but also win comps, and he's not afraid to get blood on his hands in some cases, which admittedly is a bit of a downside, but still he's willing to play cutthroat. And he sort of employs a similar strategy of wanting people to think that he is not worth much. He wants people to underestimate him. And I actually think he'll come off as pretty affable to a lot of people to where he'll be able to enact that strategy. And he also talks a bit about how he wants to stay loyal to his closest allies for jury management purposes, which could be a negative in that maybe he won't be as cutthroat as he seems. But again, he still seems to have a very strong awareness of the game. And he also talks about how he doesn't want to reveal his occupation as an entrepreneur, but so unlike other people that have lied about their occupation, he does have something else that he is on the side where he talks about being like a Special Olympics coach that he's going to use instead. So he's not completely lying. And I feel like Jag just gives me a lot of good vibes. I feel like he's someone that people will gravitate towards and someone that can still win comps. So I think it's for all those reasons that I think Jag will probably be my winner pick coming to the season. And while there could be this concern that he'll be this big target, I still feel like compared to other people, he can definitely maneuver himself accordingly. which is why I do have him as my winner pick going into Big Brother 25. And there we go. That will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. Really helps out with the channel. Now I'll be back again next week to update the power rankings again, so stay tuned for that. Tonight during the premiere, I will be live streaming that, so you can check me out there. And in general, I like to do live streams during the live shows. I think that'll be something fun to try out, so you can catch me on Thursday nights. I have also started a Patreon, and I want to thank my patrons for supporting me. So if you want to take part in that, feel free to click the link in the description. And I also have a Discord server, which you can also join by clicking the link in the description. And we'll actually be doing some fun games during the season. So if you want to follow along with us during the season, so be sure to join. There's a lot of stuff coming your way. But for now, that's the video. See ya.